Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I am continuing my discussion of Trails of Cold Steel 3. If you have not seen the previous part, I'll clear a link to it in the description down below. But also, do know that we're dealing with spoilers. So now that that's out of the way, actually kind of picking up a point I left off with the first recording, because that was literally only a couple hours ago at the time of recording this. The fact of the matter is, I was talking about Rean, and I talked about it a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about how he's grown as a character, and I think it's so interesting. Because I brought this up before, I think it's kind of an interesting thing about Rean is the fact is he doesn't have a lot of self-confidence. Like, he just kind of he's very humble in regard of I'm not that strong. He has moments where he's like, no, I think I can bridge, when he was saving Alphen and he was facing off against Blue Blanc and Duvalie, he was able to go no, with my power, I think I can, I could bridge the gap between us. Even if it's just me, I can take these two on myself. So that, and that's the entire sequence he's using, he's using his overpowers. So it's one of those instances, and I think that kind of gets reflected in 3 where he is a lot more confident, but he still has that issue of having that thing of he wants to handle so much on his own, and he still has that habit that even he's because new Class 7 calls him out when he wants to go rescue Millium by himself. They're no, this is just as much for us, especially for Altina. It's no, I'm gonna go. Are you really gonna be so selfish and cocky about this whole thing to think you can do this on your own? We're here, let us help you. And that's something that old Class 7 has to remind her. It's you're not in this alone, you got us too, rely on us. And that was a hard thing for him, because once again Rean puts other people before himself, and he doesn't it's a lesson that he learns in 2 that no, it's not that people can rely on me. I can rely on people too. They're here for me. They got my back no matter what. So I think that's still something he struggles with, from time to time, because obviously he ended up leaving his students behind on multiple occasions. And obviously he's I'm proud of what you were able to do, but it's kind of shitty that you disobeyed orders and followed me, but eventually gets to the point yeah, you're right, I'm not going to leave you guys behind. And obviously he made an effort and point to be anytime we're going forward, I'm always going to have you back me up, Even with the Juno situation, he's I'm having you stay here because we don't know where these railway cannons might end up and stuff like that. So we need you here at camp with everybody else getting locked and loaded and, ready to move out when it's time, So it's just an interesting aspect about his growth as a character that I was oh yeah, I think that's such an interesting thing for Rean's character, just to see him grow from 1 and 2, where he's still growing, but you still see a lot of that elements there, but see a little less of it. It isn't that, because I think he realizes, like I said, even though he has those issues from time to time, he has to go yeah, you're right, I still got a lot of growing to do. But I think there is still that thing, he is willing to rely on a lot more people. And he I think it's because it's new people. It's realizing oh, these are my students. He's because his motherly instincts kick in and he wants to protect them. But at the same time, it's right, I was literally in your same situation, so I gotta have not only just belief, as in you guys. I mean, to be fair, he doesn't have as much self-confidence in himself as an instructor either, because he's I messed up here, especially stuff in the end. He's I failed as an instructor, but Randy was nah, dude, you are good. Don't, mistakes you're making, you're not a professional. You've literally only been doing this a couple months, not even a full year. He's only been an instructor over the course of the game for what? He's only one for a couple months. It's 4 or 5 months at most, so I was just thinking about that because I couldn't remember the time frame, because it, regardless, tensions and all that, but it's I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. Once again, I've gotten little peaks, but I can't wait to play it myself and see just how much more Rean continues to grow into the 4th game, who he ends up being. Because it's kind of a spoiler, but I do know that he does officially become a divine blade in the 4th game. Just because I randomly saw a picture of him in the 4th game, and it read as when Rean becomes officially becomes a divine blade. If you're unaware or don't remember, divine blade being the name given to people who've reached master level. With the 8 leaves, they become known as his master's a divine blade. Cassius is Bright is is one as well, and so is home dude from I'm blanking on his name. the dude from Crossbow who's part of Lloyd's team and group, like he's a Divine Blade as well, I believe. You know, he's like the Divine Blade of Wind. So I'm thinking, and because of what his master says to him in that letter, I'm thinking like Rean's going to become the Divine Blade of Light or something like that. You'd almost think maybe Flame, considering like all the flame related attacks he has, but I think it's also just probably just going to be like, no, the Divine Blade of Light. I mean, light and fire kind of go hand in hand in certain regards, so it would make sense for him to be the Divine Blade of Light. If that ends up being the trajectory, sorry, that they end up going, once again, I don't know anything. I don't want to know anything, so like I said, it's just me making those assumptions now. For this next section, I wanted to kind of talk about old Class 7, kind of seeing where everyone ended up, you know, and it's so interesting because it's not just about Rean's growth, it's like everyone's growth. It's just that giddy moment. I remember playing it for the first time, that giddy moment, and I still even felt it a little bit during 2, just seeing where everyone ends up. And it's like Alisa's leading the 4th division of the Rhineford Company, because obviously she made the whole point of like she wants to change the Rhineford company from what her mom's made it. It's like you have your reasons for doing this, and it's like this and that, but it's like you're taking the company in a wrong direction. I'm going to be the one set it on a better path, you know. And it's like obviously her mom was like, well, don't just speak, do it. And obviously we see that she's been working hard on so much, just obviously like what we saw in the game. Obviously orbital bites are much more widespread than they were before, because at the time the only people we really knew that had orbital bites were Angie, because obviously she eventually gets a new one, but obviously there's the one she left to Rean when she got kicked out of Thor's because of the whole situation with her dad. Regardless, the fact of the matter is her working on that. There's basically those jetpacks for the Panzer soldats, like those as well, like she did that. And obviously we see at the end like her making that thing, it was like her, Tio and Tita like ended up making one of those, I forgot what they're called, because so it's literally like a combination of like ZTF, Rhineford, and the M. Stein Foundation kind of like all together with Alisa's. And just, you know, probably one of my favorite things is just, and everyone harps on it because it's like every time they're reunited, because I think this is a beautiful thing that they did. It's kind of, this kind of mirrors 2 in a little bit, how Rean is reunited with Class 7 like slowly, like in chunks, and they bring that back in this game because I think it's so interesting, because obviously the main focus is his time at the main branch, so it's mainly focused on the new Class 7, because old Class 7 you get one-off like bonding events with them, because like all your bonding event points are spent with new Class 7, and obviously Toa, because she kind of falls in that category as well. But like all the other old Class 7 characters and stuff like that, you get like one-off like bonding. You literally get one bonding event with every character over the course of the game, and I thought that was such an interesting way, because obviously the main focus is this new Class 7, him as an instructor, getting close to his students and everything. But regardless, I just like the fact is when they get reunited, they're hugging and everything, and everyone's like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? And like, once again, it's very mirrored to like their reunion in 2 as well. Like I said, it's just so interesting because like in 2, like you get together and you stay together. And this, you know, it's like everyone's doing their own thing until you finally reunite to like near the end of the game where everyone's together, whether it's everything dealing with the Dark Dragon and then eventually everything with the Grawl of Erebos, like that whole situation where like all of Class 7 is, most of Class 7 is reunited in that part. But it's just, it's nice to see how much Alisa's grown, and just like I feel like she's not, like, I think it even showed you in some of the conversations she has with her mom. They're very limited. They don't come up that much throughout the game. But even her interactions with her mom, she doesn't have the same reactions that she does. And obviously she has it a little bit with Sharon, but even then it's still like she's grown and matured to the point she notices things are off. Because she notices like Sharon's like, yeah, Sharon's not acting like her typical self, so she knows something's off in that regard. So I think she's a lot more cognizant, and I think she's a lot more accepting, because I think because she was so busy trying to get independent that now she's willing to allow, like, I think it's just proof of her growth that she's not, because her mom would probably look at her as just kind of like, oh yeah, you let your attitude get the better of you, just kind of like how, you know, very stubborn Alisa can be. So I think this game, it encapsulated, you know, in just the times you see Alisa and everything, and just shows you how much she's grown. So I think that's kind of an interesting element to it. And obviously, you know, Sharon always wanting to leave her and Rean alone, because that's what I mean, even storyline wise, they pushed the Rean and Alisa thing so much. So it's not just kind of like a because it's always a will they, won't they type of situation. I will really quickly interject and say, like, I did find out whether or not you could get like intimate like that with other characters, because I brought it up in 2. I couldn't, because I hadn't really done it with any other character stuff. Alisa, I know that you can actually, like, it ends up being like a very intimate relationship, not just like, oh, you obviously have feelings for each other, and it is intimate, but it's even more intimate with Alisa because you can kiss and everything. So, you know, I've wondered about that in this one, and you can go further, but it's just like, because it becomes an option for Laura and Fee, I just chose more so the friend route with them, because even though it was my second playthrough, I was like, still go down the Lisa route, just because that's where that goes. It's the most blatant, obvious relationship. But regardless, it was just something I figured I might as well bring up. Jumping into the next person who's part of the old Class 7 is Elliot. I love that Elliot is just like a renowned, like well-known musician and stuff like that. I think it's actually kind of interesting too how like Elliot, like, because I'm blanking in my mind, like, because I think you meet with Millium first, because when she shows up with Lecter at the academy, I'm fairly certain that was in chapter 1. I believe, I could be mistaken, I don't remember, because I'm blurring it all together in my head. I'm first, so, but it's still just kind of interesting, like, who's the next person you meet? It is Elliot, because they end up talking about it later on when, like, you and Gaius and Elliot are talking over the Arcus, which I think that's such an interesting development they made with the Arcus units and stuff like that, about how, like, well, mainly they're used as the communication devices that they are, because before they were just used as a phone basically, but now they're actually like video calls and stuff like that, because it's mainly I mean, it's just the advancement of the Arcus unit, but also it's because of the Prince, you know, Oliver giving you that artifact that allowed you all to stay in contact no matter how far apart you were. But like there's a point later on where Rean is talking to Elliot and Gaius, and they're like, oh man, us being like this is super nostalgic, because it's like Gaius and Elliot were the first 2 people Rean got close to, because like when they were in the old schoolhouse, like when everyone else is kind of either going off on their own or eventually pairing up, Elliot and Gaius and Rean were a team first. So it's like those bonds were kind of created first and foremost in, you know, Class 7. That became like the first like connections in Class 7. And obviously, you know, because I also talk about it like, without, like, when it comes to Elliot and Gaius, like, those are the only characters that never really had too much issue with Rean. I mean, truth be told, it's the same thing with, like, Fee technically uses as well. Like, but even the whole little bit of a thing with Laura, and, you know, Fee never really had any issues, and Rean always kind of accepted her, even when it was immediate, like, oh, the whole Jaeger thing, obviously that led to the whole Laura Fee. Regardless, it was just kind of something I was thinking about. But regardless, circling back to it, I do love that Elliot's this renowned person, and I love that because this is something they reference in 2, because when you run into his dad tries to hug him, and then Elliot dodges to the side and taps his dad back like, nah, Dad, stop. He did that in 2, but then like his dad grabs him again anyway. I am bummed you don't get to see Fiona, but it is nice, because obviously later on, because it was a question I was wondering about, like, oh, this Olaf had the same way he feels about Elliot as he does with Fiona, and it kind of shows, because there's a whole Nightheart situation of like where they're becoming a thing. He's like, yeah, I gotta accept the fact that she's 24 now, and this might potentially be a thing, but even he's still not, it's still not 100% setting right with him, so he's still the overprotective parent. And even that moment, I love that Rean's like, and is it like that? Am I like that with Elise? It was like staring in the mirror type of situation. So it does showcase that, yeah, he probably had to like pull back, because Fiona kind of puts him in his place a lot of times, I think. And so, because even Elliot's threatened in the past, like, if you don't stop, I'm gonna tell Fiona, and he's like, okay. Because I'm assuming like their mom was the exact same way that she could put him in place. So Fiona's like very reminiscent of that. Regardless, I think it's actually beautiful, like how his story is what it is, because it is this forever growth, because Elliot started off in 1 kind of being like, remember, he didn't want to go to Thor's initially. He wanted to go to a music academy, but his dad was like, no, you're going to Thor. You're going to a military academy instead of the music academy you want to. And so they settled on Thor's, because Elliot found out like, oh, there's a music program here, you know, there's a Land Orchestra club. But eventually, you know, he grows to accustomed to it, because obviously that being an issue for him over the course of the game was kind of like, he missed being in a Heimdall, because it's like, oh, the life he could have been in, you know, school and everything. But he eventually grew to appreciate it, because he's like, honestly, if it wasn't for Thor's, I wouldn't have the amazing friends that I have, but I wouldn't also have been able to grow. I wouldn't have been able to broaden my horizons. Yeah, I'm able to still do music, but it made me also appreciate, yeah, this is something that is important to me, because obviously for him, this 1 and 2 is him figuring out, well, what am I going to do after graduation? Will I join the military? Am I very serious about music? Because he's kind of wishy-washy about it at first, but then he's like, but it is kind of important to me. But I think for him to realize, like, by going to Thor's, he brought in his horizons, because he realizes how the world worked, and if he'd gone to a music academy, he wouldn't have known about that. So he was able to grow even more at Thor's, and eventually, like, his dad was like, you know, because how much you've grown and everything. I think this is in 2. Might have been in 1, but I think it was in 2, where he's like, whatever decisions you make after you graduate and stuff like that, I will 100% support him. And Elliot's like, whoa. And that's the thing in 2, because he sets up the whole thing of he wants to make music so that he can help people. He wants people to kind of bridge the gaps between people, bring people together through the love of music. And you see the continuation of that in 3, especially when he's able to enthrall so many people with his music. Especially it's beautiful because obviously that flows into his combat style, because like obviously all his abilities and stuff like that are, you know, music related, you know, like his Nocturne Bell, his Blue Lullaby, his Holy Song. I am kind of bummed because of the whole only one S-Craft thing. His S-Craft is a heal. I mean, it's a really good heal, but obviously, because in 1, it was an offensive one, and then the second one he gets in 2 is a heal. Because it's even interesting, because like obviously, the one that Emma has, hers is also in the same boat. It's not a attack, it's a heal. Not a heal, but it's like a perfect guard. Which obviously that S-Craft comes super in handy in certain fights, especially like McBurn and stuff like that. But regardless, tangents and all, it's just like I love the progression of Elliot's story in that regard, and just like, you know, seeing how much he's grown as well, because he still kind of has that little bit of that like worrywartness to him, you know, that he's kind of like, oh man, but like I think much like Rean, I think Elliot's grown a lot more confident as well, and I think you see that in just like the battles that you're able to be there with him at too, you know. So it's just his storyline is so dope to see it has progressed the way it has. Then you have Laura, who's mastered the Arcade school, and it's like holy shit, and she's such a badass. When you look at all the like her techniques have changed, and once again I brought it up earlier, like how her S-Craft is basically her dad's S-Craft, because obviously that's like the peak. But even then she's like, even though I'm a master, the fact of the matter is I've still got more room to grow, you know, Laura being Laura, you know. And even like when she first meets with Rean, her hugging him and everything, and it's just kind of like, this is only natural, we haven't seen each other in such a long time. And I think like that reaction I thought was pretty, because obviously like when you reunited in 2, like she felt that as well, but it's just like, you know, I think that speaks to how much she's grown as a person too. Like I think she wears her heart on her sleeve a lot more than maybe she would have in the past. And I just thought that was such a dope thing. And also the fact that she's going to all these schools, like the Vander School and stuff like that, and she's training and teaching and stuff like that. It's like so dope to see, because it makes sense out of any person who's going to reach that level is going to be Laura, because we've seen Laura's work ethic, because everything she's always done has always been about bettering herself as a swordsman. Like, because she's always been that person. It's because aside from the feast stuff, that's the most kind of like, whoa, like negative aspect to Laura that you've ever really gotten to experience in the story. But obviously after that, she's just grown from it, and just see the progression of her story, to see the progression as her as a swordsman wanting to surpass her father. I mean, that's always been her goal, because she actually talked about, I think it was because she never was able to beat Klaus on her own. Obviously when you fight Klaus in 1, I believe, yeah, it's only because like, oh, you're all working together, but she wants to one day be able to beat him by, and it's also something I thought about too. It's like, I guess he's in Legram, because like we don't see Klaus at all in 3. I don't think they even reference like, you know, what he's up to, but I'm assuming like he's keeping a training hall open back in Legram, because obviously he's acting master when Victor's away, which Victor's away quite a bit. Understandably so, because he's a courageous situation. Regardless, but her always striving to be the powerful swordsman that she is, and I love that. And it's just also like, I love that I feel like her outfit in this is kind of a combination of kind of like taking her dad's uniform to a little bit, but also taking a uniform she had in 2 and like modifying it a little bit. Also like the longer hair, like her ponytail is now it's curled and everything, and you know, it's just Laura is the badass that she is and everything. So I think that's pretty dope. It just like the progression of her story as well. Then you have Emma, who's progressed as a witch, like just the spell she's casting and everything, because she's now definitely on VIDS level, but I think even then she's still kind of like, not quite there, but I think she's on that way of just, she can be an even greater witch. And once again, it's just like, I think, like I said, I think this resonates with everyone, that everyone's a little bit more confident, because I think she has her moments even in 3, but I think, you know, talking with Rean and everything does reassure it, because that ends up being one of their bonding events where she ends up teleporting him and using Valimar as kind of a pinpoint, able to kind of use teleportation, and they're able to kind of hang out together in those woods that are in St. Arc. I believe those are the ones. Yeah. Those woods where because obviously she's going around following Vita, trying to figure out like what Vita's up to, you know, but she went through training, continuing her training as a witch to become even stronger, and we see some of those spells enacted and just what she's able to do, help Rean get control of his powers, like her and Celine working together to make him that charm, to make it so that he can control his power. Just seeing her grow, you know, and then also seeing the relationship she has with Rose, her grandmother, and that being a thing. Because I feel like you don't necessarily, like, that relationship she has with her grandmother, you see her kind of having that relationship with Celine as well, where she'll chastise her grandmother, she'll kind of chastise, you know, Celine, but it's still, even at that point, it's there, but the relationship she has with her grandmother and she has with Celine isn't quite the one she has with Vita, but I think eventually it will get to the point that she will have that point where she will correct Vita by being like, you didn't have to do this all on your own, you could have come to me, like, we're sisters, like, you should have relied on me, you know. But it just, the beautiful progression of her story, and I'm assuming they're gonna set it up so that she ends up eventually replacing her grandmother, maybe as the head of the Hexen clan. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe her life has a different story for her. I mean, she hasn't really talked about, like, you know, she went back to the Hexen clan and everything, because obviously she came to Thor's because she had her own role to play and everything. But even then, it's like, because obviously over the course of this game, you learn a lot more about the history of the Hexen clan and the gnomes, and just a lot of like Erebonia's history. I mean, not just Erebonia, but Zumeria, because it's the world as a whole, because obviously Erebonia is just like a country or a continent. No, it is considered a country, isn't it? Yeah. Regardless of all that, so I love the progression of her story, of her, you know, growing like that. Once again, I think it was even like Fee, when you reunited, like, brings up the fact is, wow, Emma, you've gotten even chessier. She was like, I was hoping you wouldn't say anything about that. Because even like, there's even this moment with Ash where he was like, them big old titties or something like that, and just everyone was like, Ash, what the hell is wrong with you? And you see Emma kind of blushing. She doesn't really know what to say. It's just like, ugh. But nevertheless. Then you have Machias' story, where it's like he's slightly following in his dad's footsteps, but also kind of not, kind of doing his own route, because he's basically there to investigate the government, because they're there to basically be like, okay, so what are you guys up to? And obviously when you're in Crossbell, him and his Rainer, I think it's his the person he works with, I don't know if that's his supervisor, because it seemed like he's more so in charge than Machias is, but maybe they're at the same rank. But whatever, it's like, it's kind of like, oh, we got the runaround, like they're stalling us and everything. But and it even plays into Machias's S-craft about like it being called Justice Bullet, and I forgot what he said. I've heard it recently and I just can't remember what it was. Oh god, because it plays into his job that he's like your I'm blanking on it right now, and it upsets me so much, because like I said, it's tied into his job and the whole justice element of that he's trying to, and I like that being something that you do learn, like obviously, because I didn't talk about it, I should have talked about it, but obviously like the end result of everyone's like at the very, like the bonding events at the very end, once you've maxed them out and you're able to get the trophy associated with them, because I ended up grinding them out and ended up, because it's my second playthrough, and because I was able to go to every bonding event, like everyone was already in a good enough position where all I had to do was spend one ticket on everybody, and because obviously you kind of double up with the Elisa and Alphen situation, just because you don't have as many opportunities to increase things with the Alphen. So technically you would have been able to just do it in one ticket, but technically you need two, because you have to fill out Alphen, but that's mainly just for the item. You get it once you get Elise all the way to 5, you get the trophy ornament. Getting technical about gameplay stuff that's not really that important, but like obviously, you know, the whole situation of like circling back to what Elliot, you know, like I said, what he wants to do with his music, and obviously Emma, you know, being someone that obviously everyone can rely on, you know, she's like as your class president, kind of seeing you all through this. But obviously Machias, you know, it's like together Rean will get justice, you know, him being kind of almost like this, not necessarily this, but I feel like almost like this essence of like, you know, seeking truth and justice and being this hero, and just what Machias' story holds for him, and just him trying to get to the truth, because he knows like there's shady stuff going on. So like, you know, he worked his butt off, because we saw at the end of 2, like this has been something he's been aiming for a while, the schools he got into just to put him in this position. So he's been working his tail off to get to where he is, and to see it all kind of come, you know, and come to fruition, just seeing what he's doing and what he's capable of. I think it's just kind of a dope aspect, you know. And I even brought this, I might have talked about this before, but obviously like him and Jusis is bumping heads. It does not come up at, I mean, to be fair, once again, you're not with Class 7 a lot, and even if you are, you two, like those two aren't around each other enough for it to be a thing. But the little bit they are around each other, it's kind of like, oh, you two, and it's like, hell no, we're not close friends and stuff like that. But there's also the thing of like, even when you like win in battle, and Jusis makes a wisecrack about like, oh, I guess you have gotten better or something like that, and Machias is like, that's my line. So it's still there, but it's not as big. But that's mainly because Machias and Jusis aren't around each other enough. But obviously they lock, like they're together, like during the final thing of almost like, he's like, Machias is like, get your head in the game, Jusis, like, you know, because obviously when you end up fighting, you get spoiler, you know, the Iron Bloods and everything. So it's one of those things, which I also think that speaks volumes too, that like Machias is like, I got your back during this. Like, despite their constant headbutting, he knows how hard this is from Jusis to be facing off not only against Millium, but also against his brother, you know. So I think in that moment, like Machias having his back kind of shows like how much they have, in fact, you know, grown over the course of things, you know. So despite, you know, the headbutting. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting aspect. And then you have Jusis, obviously, you know, continuing, you know, the path of him taking over, you know, the Albareas, you know, so everything under the Albarea, you know, banner, like him having to kind of take over stuff because his dad's not there and his brother's not there, and kind of the pressures of that, him trying to bring back some pride to the name Albarea, because his dad kind of ruined a lot of that because of everything he did, you know, him getting the Northern Jaegers to burn down Celtic and everything. And obviously it's also like, you're also the one that said, was it Nidhogg to Ymir that led to like Teal getting shot and everything. So it's like, you attacked one of my classmates' homes, you know. So, but obviously seeing, you know, who he's grown into be, and, you know, because obviously, like, the class, I think because they've all come to an understanding, so it's not that conversation of, like, because obviously it's a role that plays in this, obviously, this storyline, but it's there a little bit, is obviously the whole thing of, like, the time of nobles is gone, but, like, obviously too much of a drastic change immediately will cause problems in itself, so it's still kind of a little bit of that noble alliance, the noble faction versus the, Reformist faction, but it's not there, I feel like, as prevalently as it is in the other games, but it's still there and poignant enough in its own right. But I feel like he doesn't play as much of a role in that, like him and Machias kind of being the opposite ends of each other. Definitely in the first game, a little bit in the second game. I feel like it's not as much there. I do think it's a beautiful and adorable, like the relationship he has with Millium, because even Elliot's like, do you think they, and Rean's like, yeah, they kind of got that brother-sister relationship, and then button heads, like her trying to hug him and he dodges out of the way. He's like, you need to act more ladylike, especially the way you're dressed and stuff like that, which I think is so beautiful for their relationship to come full circle. Because remember, out of anyone, when it came to Millium, he was the most distrustful of her the first game. And obviously that relationship is there in 2, and this is obviously built off of it more and more. So it seems like in that time frame, they probably spent the most time together, because it seems like she can always make an excuse to go see Jusis, because it's like, oh, I'm the part of the intelligence division, and the fact of the matter is him being, you know, that. But even then I thought it was kind of neat where he, you know, and this kind of ties into Millium. Well, I'll save it when I get to Millium, but I just thought that was such a beautiful thing, and especially how that ties into the end. Oh my god, we're not going to go there yet. We're not going to go there yet. I got to mentally prepare myself to go there. I'm going to probably end up getting there a little bit when we talk about Millium, but obviously just like, Also, like, he is the most well-dressed member. I haven't really taken the time to really talk about, like, how everyone is dressed. Like, the fact of the matter is, Emma's outfit looks amazing. Laura's, Elliot's being, like, very, like, it has this almost, like, Victorian era kind of, like, old school, like, look to it. And it feels very fitting for him to be a musician. And, like, Alisa's kind of got this, like, sexy businesswoman kind of outfit going on. And but Jusis is the most, like, well-dressed person, because it's just like, I mean, he's definitely dressing more like a duke, in that regard. And I just thought that was just kind of interesting. But yeah. Next up, we got Fee, who's now obviously, like, after the end of 2, she's become a bracer because she figured this would be her best way and options. Well, for one, is to help out Toval and Sara, but also it was the best way to kind of be all over the place so you can look into the whole Zephyr situation. And I guess she never really found too much out, because I don't think that came up too much, because she was still seeking the members. Like, she knows where, like, Zeno and Leo, like, obviously she wasn't able to kind of catch up with them until probably the story, but I think she's still kind of unaware where the rest of I think that comes up in this game. I don't remember, is that from 2, where it's kind of like, oh yeah, like, the others are out there too doing stuff, but obviously we can't. Well, I think that was at the end of 2, where it's like, well, they told her what they were planning to do, the whole Rudiger situation, bringing the boss back and everything. I thought that was kind of an interesting turn, where we're like, oh, he's still alive, and then also, like, the whole Divine Knight situation was interesting. But, like, seeing her progress, as, a young bracer, being, like, one of the youngest to reach the position that she has, like, because, like, I think prior to that, it was Sara that held that record. Now Fee does, and just how much she's grown. I even love, like, that, much like a lot of the other characters, like, a lot of their techniques stay the same. Obviously, like, some of the techniques you get into, they don't have in this game, which is kind of a bummer. Like, Alisa doesn't have her Mirage arrow, but she still has her Flameberg and her Molten arrow and her Heavenly Gift. But, like, Fee, like, her sweep, one of her techniques is that it's something edge, and then she has her Tri-Cyclone, which was kind of her bullet cyclone, but, like, obviously this is a more advanced, powerful version of it. But regardless, because I think it changes it, because you get that technique in 1, but I think it changes to something else in 2, because, like, everyone's techniques get advanced. But regardless, seeing her kind of grow, and obviously, like, her and Sara and everyone teasing I get about him, the whole him and Tita situation, so I thought that was kind of dope. But seeing her become this full-blown bracer, especially further proof of and showing of how much she's kind of grown on her own, grown because of this new family she found, but also, like, how much she's able to accomplish on her own. But, like, I made my decisions, I became a bracer, taking her life in her own hands, because beforehand it was just kind of like, once again, she was very, it's like, oh, I was part of Zephyr. After leaving Zephyr, it's like, well, I'll go along with what Sara wants. It's like, okay, if that, you make the decision, but Sara's like, no, you have to. And this is something I had talked about before, that now that I'm in 3, I can talk about it even more. I think it's beautiful how that comes full circle in a case. I think Rean took a lot of that interaction between Sara and Fee and applied it to Altina, because Altina was very like, if this is the mission, it's like, no, I want you to be here because you want to be here. You have to be the one to make the decision. So, but to see Fee in the position where she is now, where she is making those choices, I'm gonna do what I want to do because I want to do it, not just because I'm going with the flow of things, And I think that's just like a beautiful aspect of her character, to see its growth over the course of these games and end up where she is now. Then we got your boy Gaius, and I think this is something I talked about before. Like, I like how each game, the final character you get, associated with ends up being different. Because obviously in the first game, it's like, obviously it's Crow and Millium. Obviously you got to know Millium a little bit more, but she joined Class 7. She's technically the last one because Crow comes into the room first, and then, but obviously they join at the same time. Regardless, I mean, because the whole Crow situation, he's still a part of Class 7 no matter what. Even being revealed to be C, even no longer being there, he will always be a part of Class 7. So it's not like it takes away from that. But it's interesting that Millium ends up being the end there. The last person you get reunited with in 2 is Jusis. He's the last person, and for this game, for the last person to old Class 7 for you to meet up with is Gaius. And obviously the mystery of, like, yo, what's Gaius been up to? Like, we haven't been able to get in contact with you the past 6 months, and him being a little cagey and dodgy about it. And then we get the reveal of, like, holy shit, he's part of the church. your Grossritter himself, you know. Well, no, because like the Grossritter, I think that's specifically Thomas and Rosine and them. That's them. Well, whatever, he's become part of the church, and it's so interesting for that. I mean, it makes sense full circle wise, because obviously religion kind of plays a role in this, but obviously it's especially for him, because as you know, someone from Nord, like how the wind is important to them and the gods, so it's, you know, like, you know, they believe a lot of the same things, and just him being kind of basically the spiritual person that he was, because like he always had that thing of like, yeah, there's something in the wind, you know, because I even think it's adorable, like in one of the games, one of his things, when you mess up, get like when you're cooking and you get like a terrible cook, he talks about like, oh, the winds are very mischievous. The winds are being very mischievous. I think it's in 1 when he does a bad cook or whatever, and I thought that was so adorable and neat. I was like, oh, I love that line. Nevertheless, I like the reveal about, like, especially when it comes reveal where it's like, oh man, especially because he does that thing with Emma where he basically helps amplify her power, and it's like, whoa guys, what was that? It's like, yo, and then you get it revealed, and also how that ties into his S-craft, him tapping into his Dominion powers, because his predecessor was the Roaring Lion and he's the Soaring Phoenix, which makes sense on so many levels because of the whole like ties to the wind, but also like there's the whole Zeo situation, which I'm so bummed that Zeo isn't an attack in this like he is in 2, but part of me's like, oh, that could be something that they bring back and forth, because like Zeo's, you know, he pops in here and there over the course of the game, but obviously like because of everything that he's gone through, like because he talks about it, like he's always been able to sense things a little bit more, so maybe this was kind of always going to be his destiny. Because I love that, like when Gaius first shows up and McBurn's like, what the hell? Because he notices something immediately about him. He's like, yeah, it's not the same thing as the Ashen Kid. He's like, you know, it's not the same thing as Rean's situation, but it's different. He's like, oh, because he was like, oh, one of those kids just got a lot more interesting than I remember them being. Because I think even Leanne kind of noticed it when he showed up too, being like, there was something, like when he first shows up, you know, when they're rescuing Millium, I think for her, it's like, yeah, there's something there she wasn't quite sure. So it's interesting finding out that it's his connection to all this, and I feel even then we still never got the full scope of what he's capable of, because obviously there's the whole thing with Leanne and McBurn being kind of stopped, and it's like, whoa, this is part of your obviously it was Gaius and Emma working together, but it's just like, it's so dope to see that. And obviously even he's getting even taller, and obviously it's nice to see like obviously Gaius still being who he is. He even has that moment with Patrick where Patrick's like, I'm sorry about what I said before, and like Gaius is like, really? No, I completely forgot about it. It was like so long ago. But obviously it always sat, you know, because obviously for Patrick it's like, no, like I still regret who I was back then, the immature child, and even seeing how much he's grown. Oh, it's just so good. But I love the progression of, you know, Gaius' story, because obviously for him it's like he's going to do everything he can, because it's like because obviously that's why he went back to Nord in the first place, was because he wanted to get a different perspective. He wanted to kind of see, you know, what was happening between Calvard and Erebonia, because Erebonia is his second home, so he always knows that no matter what ends up happening, it's always going to trail back to Nord, but also it would give him a better sense of like what's going on and everything. And obviously the person who trained him and taught him in the way, you know, and, you know, losing them because he sacrificed his life to save Gaius, and for Gaius to inherit his stigma and everything was pretty dope. So it's just like, I love where that story ends up taking us. And then there's Millium being kind of her normally like adorable, bubbly self. Still kind of handled it, because obviously there was the whole like Brionia Island thing. Maybe because she was part of the intelligence division, maybe being an Iron Blood, she decided to handle things on her own. Maybe because she didn't want to worry Jusis and them, but obviously you worried them even more so. But obviously like her being so happy when she's reunited with everyone, obviously getting to spend more time with that whole relationship between her and Altina. It's like Tilly and Sammy, it's like, don't call me Tilly, don't call Clown Miscellaneous Sammy, you know, because even later on it's like, oh, thanks a lot, Sammy, and because obviously Una calls Clown Miscellaneous that, and she's like, but that name Sammy, but it's just like, and I think it's a beautiful situation where it's like, because when it's all said and done, when old Class 7 reunites, it's like, what's Millium going to do? Because Class 7 is eventually going to have to go toe to toe with especially with everything that Osborn's up to, and they know like how that's going to put them on the opposite ends. I mean, for Rean, it's like, as his son, it's up to me to put that in place. And obviously for Jusis, it's like, my brother's just as much a part of this. So whatever just planning, like, I'm sure my brother had a hand in it. But also it puts Millium in a complicated situation, because obviously she's an Iron Blood like Rufus. And also, like, obviously like all the Iron Bloods, the Chancellor, you know, Osborn means a lot to them. So to be able, you know, so it puts her in this compromised position. But for her, it's like, first and foremost, you know, it's like she never really knew what sadness was until she cried when it was over. Like at the end of 2, when she cried, it's like she never felt that. She's never really had that connection with people. Like obviously that was something, you know, because obviously going to Class 7 initially was just kind of a job for her, but now it became more. Just like how Tina, it was like kind of a mission, but eventually it becomes more. And you see that resonate so much with Millium. So for her, it's like, I will put you guys first. I'm a member of Class 7 before anything else. So you guys are my family. And so even if I have to go up against Gramps and all of them and Claire, I will do it, because I choose you guys every time. And it's just like all of them feeling so heartfelt, and them all being like, out of any of us, you might kind of still act a little kiddish, but you are still the one who's matured the most. You've grown the most out of all of us, because she's had to think, she's thought long and hard about her position in all of this, and it puts her in that very compromised position, going against the people you do think of like family, you know, because like Claire is kind of like a sister to her to a certain extent, because she even brings it up in 2 where she had never really, it might have been 2, it might have been 1, but I think it is more so in 2. Like she's like, she never really thought about the dynamic too much, but obviously like Lecter and Millium, I mean Lecter and Claire do mean something to her, just like, you know, Osborn does, because he is like a father to all of them. He kind of took them in, kind of gave her purpose, you know, gave her, you know, a life and everything. So, but obviously Class 7 did it in a different way. But obviously, you know, as Rufus talks about later on, when it comes to Osborn, he has this charm about him that makes you want to do whatever he asks you to do, you know. So that being a whole complicated thing, and just touching on it, won't lie to you, played it through a second time. The Millium ending broke my heart. I was tearing up. I was like, no, Millium. Like, because like I said, I think she's the first member of Class 7 you meet up with again in this game, because I'm pretty sure that happens before you meet up with Elliot and St. Arc. But so it's almost like they're setting that up, especially because they're giving Millium this growth. Like, I think because I talked about it, like, she's the only person, aside from like Sara ends up in an interesting situation, because obviously her, Fee, and Laura, but it's like, and it's something I talked about and I think it's kind of interesting, Millium's the only person you bond with a little bit without it being a bonding event, because she has a bonding event later on where it's like, oh, Claire's dating someone, but it's like, no, it's just she brings Rean along, but it ends up being a means of arresting someone. What I mean is, like, Millium is the only character you can technically be a little bit ahead with compared to everyone else, because even with everyone's bonding events and stuff like that, like, everyone's still going to be like a little bit behind, because you actually spent more time with Millium, because like you go through the keep with her and Altina, so that kind of brings your bond up a little bit earlier than anyone else's, so it puts it in this very interesting position, I think, you know, because it's like she's like the only other character you really get to hang out with prior to like a bonding event, you know, because everyone else's bonding events, obviously most of them, because like Machias takes you away from Lise, because you meet up with him in Heimdall, and this is actually, because I didn't do this my first time through, I did it my second time through, but obviously you meet up with the Hugo thing, and you kind of find out about what his storyline is and kind of who he's becoming all this time and frame and everything. But regardless, it's sad to see her story, because even when you're fighting against her, she's like, don't you guys hold back. It's like she's there for her own reasons too, but even when it was done and all said and done, she didn't fully go along with the plan, because even Lecter and Claire had their reservations, you know. It's like the only one that's all for it, it's Rufus, but Millium is cheering you on all the way, like, you do what you got to do, and they're like, because they completely understand, you know, why Millium is in the position that she's in, because she made it clear, it's like, we don't have to worry about it, because you made it clear, like, even if you're fighting here, that you choose us over them all the time, you know, and that hit me, and we're like, yeah, you know. So it's I hope there's a reverse to that. Once again, I don't know anything. I'm just hoping, I'm like, tell me there. I mean, she's a homunculi, so maybe part of me thinking like maybe you could reverse that, maybe not. Part of me wonders is that, because obviously I didn't read it the first time through. I've made more of a point to read the books. I mean, I think technically there's some of those stories. There's the tomato story about the tomato who wants to be picked and stuff like that. It's like, when you actually break that down and think about it, it's not the same thing. It's not a one-for-one, but there's a certain parallel you can create between Altina and Millium's situation being homunculi and what that kind of correlates in that story. But there's also like the Heartless Edgar story, that being kind of a beautiful story in its own right. It's kind of sad. That twist came out of nowhere because the story is actually very episodical. Like, you know, take something like Red Moon Rose was just a very like overarching story about taking down this vampire. Even the Gambler Jack books, like, they are very overarching stories, not episodical. It seemed like that Heartless Edgar books kind of were just about him getting close to this woman Clementine and everything, and his friend Henry, and them kind of like in these complicated situations. But then like the left twist on like it's like chapter 8, they bring it up. It's like, oh, and spoilers, he's an android. He's a artificial intelligence. You're like, wait, what? But it kind of works out beautifully. But like, that's why I was even more interested to read a book, because I was like, because at that time I knew like obviously the whole OZ, you know, homunculi situation that Altina and Millium had. So that's why I was wondering like if there was going to be a tie in there. It's not, but part of me wonders, is that even more so reason why that story was written for this game, because of Millium's story. But regardless, like I said, I think because of that, maybe you can get their memories implanted. Obviously her and Eric Gatlum have been turned into the sword, but it's like maybe you can reverse that in some shape or form because of homunculi. I hope so, because I don't want Millium to stay dead. There's a lot of stuff in this I'm like, is that permadeath, or is like maybe they found a way to work around it? I don't know. We'll kind of have to see. And then finally, we had the whole Sara situation. Obviously, we learn a lot more about her situation, because I brought it up before. You get hints in the previous 2 games talking about her dad, and that being like the first man that she fell in love with, and that kind of explains why she likes alcohol the way she does. But understanding like how she became a Jaeger, to like obviously she became a bracer because her dad never wanted her to be in this line of work, especially because he sacrificed his life for her. And so it's and once again, and I think that's the interesting thing between Sara and Fee's stories, because they are literally the same. They are both former Jaegers turned bracers. Like all they really knew was the battlefield, and they both had dads who wanted them to have nothing to do with the battlefield. So it's interesting for their stories to kind of, and I think that's why Sara looked after Fee the way she did, because when she saw Fee, she probably saw herself. It was like looking in a mirror. You know, the parallels between their stories, and I think that's also why they make such a good team in that regard too. You know. But obviously, you know, like her opening up to Rean, and obviously them drinking together now, and then obviously he'll say some stuff, because he's like, oh yeah, like obviously like I want to be like you, because it's like, you know, you're my inspiration, you're the person, you're my role model. And she's like, whoa, she's like, you can't be saying stuff like that. She's like, I'm gonna have to be more careful around you, because you're a full-grown man now. So she starts seeing Rean in a different light, because it's like, oh, you're not just my cute student anymore, you're grown into like a full-grown man, and you've become charming, and it's just, I gotta keep my guard up around you, especially now you're my drinking buddy too. And it's like, I love that, because it's like it comes full circle, because literally all of 1 and a little bit in 2 is just kind of like, hey, why don't you have a drink with me? It's like, we're literally in the middle of school, it's a free day, but why are you here getting drunk? You know, that being a whole thing, and for it to kind of come full circle. You never get to see her fully drunk. Like when you're with her during her bonding event, she leaves a little bit, but it's just kind of like she's boarding her train and she is a little drunk. So that's the only extent of that you get in the game, but it's still showing you like, hey, Sara's still there. I forgot. I think it was like later on, like Claire, it was actually, no, it was Sharon that was like, oh yeah, like maybe I'd like to drink with you one day. And I think it was, I want to say it was Sharon where she was kind of like, no, because I'm sure you drink me under the bus or something. Like it might not have been her, it might have been someone else, but I don't remember. It might even been like Gwen. I don't remember. There's also that cute moment, like, because obviously that same night you find out about Claire's story, which, you know, we'll get to later, kind of diving into that. But it's actually interesting, like, and I read something that made note of this. Depending on who you talk to first, it actually changed the dialogue, because if you see Claire first and then, you know, everything goes down, and then you go see Sara first afterwards, it changes the dialogue where she kind of references the fact is, oh, I know, like, I can smell like Claire on you. So she kind of knew something kind of went down. So she makes like a whole point of it. But I just thought that was kind of an interesting situation. But regardless of it all, the fact of the matter is, I think it's so fascinating, because once again, it's just like how Sarah's not necessarily your instructor, but she's still kind of your instructor, and it's kind of continuing in this regard where she's, you know, filling that role as, you know, not just an instructor, but also being a part of Class 7. She's just as much having been their former instructor and everything, and so like everyone's kind of on the same level and stances and stuff like that. So it's just interesting, you know, in that regard for, you know, her story. And once again, just like the whole Northumbria situation, especially when they run into the Northern Jaegers, like Rean's able to use his speed to kind of knock the guns out of the other guys and incapacitate them, but Sara was able to get to the last guy, being like, this isn't what my dad died for. Like, the fact of the matter is, he didn't want us to kind of go down this route that you've been going. Like, you're idiots. You know, I get what you want to do stuff for home, but also you want to be able to do stuff, you know, for them while not letting them get in trouble for your actions and stuff like that. You know, that being the whole thing. So I love the complexity of just her story that we've gotten over the course of these. You know, obviously it's there in 1, but it's even more so there in 2, and you know, obviously in 3 as well. So. But obviously, I've been talking for a little while. I actually can't even process like how much, because of how short some of these videos, these segments have been. I don't know like what the time frame is in totality, so I'm just going to end it here because I figure I have been talking for a while. So I will continue this discussion of Trails of Cold Steel 3 in the next part. So I hope you stick around. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.